welcome to a special episode of the Vaishali Dialogues with the founder members of Brighat. We're very pleased and privileged to have them with us on this show and talk about the very unique and very necessary work that they're doing through their initiative in order to revive Indic or Bharatiya values, our knowledge systems in their true spirit and form, an Indic renaissance in a sense. Bhagwan knows we need all the help we can get, and every initiative in that direction is precious. I'm very honored to welcome Pankaj ji, Pankaj Saxena ji, and Raghav Krishna ji to our show. Namaste.
Namaste. Namaste, Pujita ji. Thank you so much for having us. Like you said, we need much more of this, and we are just happy to have a platform where we can speak about our collective vision.
I'm very happy to have you. And like you said, collective, that's the word. We're all
Yeah,
in our own little ways trying to do whatever we can to put the word out. I'm going to start with asking you about each one of you, and you could take it by turns, about your personal journey in briefly about how how you envisage of this project, how you are individually in your individual capacities came to this understanding of the importance of this particular renaissance or revival of sorts. So maybe a little anecdotal, each one of
sure,
you, probably by
sure,
turn.
sure, sure. Pankaj will definitely have a far more interesting story to tell. He is the storyteller. But I will begin. I just have the privilege of getting to speak first. I come from a low middle class Telugu family from Hyderabad. My father is a cost accountant and a company secretary, but he studied and he acquired his academic qualifications after I was born. So, in fact, actually, when I was about 8 or 10 years old, I remember that's when my father seriously started his professional qualification work. So my growing up was imbued with this understanding that you have to take responsibility for your actions, and that's a value that I've ingrained very deeply, having observed my father. He was a railway clerk when I was born. When we first moved to Hyderabad, his job was to issue the tickets, the platform, during nights, and that is the story that all of our relatives have also relate to us. The sheer industry and the hard work and the dint of self-made approach that my father had. So I draw my values, or I drew my understanding of life from those early experiences, and that was very clear to me, not just by way of observation, but also as an explicit instruction. My father was very clear that he is not going to ask for any favors. So very early in life, we were very clear that we were supposed to study and be on our own. Just on that note, we found our interests early on in life, and my priority was to try and make sure that I was independent as early as I could be. And right after graduation, I started working. I did my graduation as a commerce graduate, and right after that, it was very clear to me that I had to look after myself. So I started working at 21. My first job was with a company called General Electric. And I keep saying this, and this is true. I'm not saying this for posterity. That I was lucky. I was one of those fortunate ones to have graduated or come into the job market at a time when the general environment was upbeat. Right? And a lot of my empathy and understanding and concern for young people and their complexity today comes from that memory that when I graduated without any exceptional talent, I was able to find a decent job, and a rising tide lifted all boats. But when I think about the situation now, and when I think about the complexity that a young person today who's coming out into the world inhabits, both in terms of the global complexity, but also the psychological complexity that we carry, just being exposed to so many ambitions. In many ways, we were lucky because we had a simple path and we had an opportunity. So there was a convergence of both the time and the place. And then I started working in 2003. I moved into what was then a very nascent industry, which was the online gaming. And I worked with a online poker and casino company for the next 7 years. I keep saying this, that whatever I do now is in some ways a penance, but I had fun. I had fun working in an industry that was helping people gamble, and I was ironically heading a unit called Responsible Gaming, which was just to help people gamble responsibly, if you could imagine that. But that work was great for me because it put me in touch with a wide array of people from different streams. And for most part of my working life, except for a couple of years when I was in Europe, I am from Hyderabad. I worked in Hyderabad, so I was raised, spoiled, resurrected in Hyderabad. But my next big break, Pujita, came around 2010 when I returned to India, and I moved from the online poker space to a company called Electronic Arts. And Electronic Arts was a leading game publisher, is a game developer and leading game publisher even today. And for the next 8 years, I probably had the best time of my professional career because I worked with a highly creative team, which had artists, designers, product managers, technologists, strategists, making creative, fun experiences for people all over the world. The sheer thrill of seeing millions of players consume what your creation is, and the feedback loop it creates, and the high that a creative team gets when their vision gets fulfilled. I was a witness to that in many ways. I was also engineering that. I did not have a particular skill in game development. My learning and what I could contribute was the ability to look at all these disciplines coming together in a creative way. So in many ways, my experience is about building creative teams, and I had an opportunity to witness two big trends which influence the way I think about it, and it has a bearing on how we do things at Bṛhat as well. One was around the time in 2010 is when the world moved into what we call platforms. The whole idea of a destination for any product that you develop as a platform. Think about the App Store or the Google App Store today. Back then was the first sort of brush with that, and I understood the power of that platform. When you open it up to creators all over the world to collaborate. The second one was more of a business trend, but it had extremely wide ranging design ramifications, which was about when content is free. We had this whole emergence of a freemium business model, particularly in gaming. I understood the power of creativity in helping people engage because for the first time, as a producer, as somebody who is investing money in creating stuff, you are not going to make money if people just download your app. You will make money only when they engage and you build a lifetime relationship with your players. That was a huge lesson because that meant that your entire creative process, which was all about delivering a great experience upfront, had to change into a a lifetime relationship, and that has design ramifications. How do you design for 180 days of engagement? That has technological ramifications, that has team ramifications. So I drew a lot of lessons about strategy and respecting consumer choice, respecting creative teams from that experience of having seen a couple of mega trends up close and personal. But throughout all of this, the void was always there. You knew that you escaped some of the other hardships, and there is that sense of uh, sense that nags you whether you really deserve whatever little success you're getting. That was at a personal level, but at a cultural level, as I began exploring other topics, I realized that the story that I understand about Bharat, about my own culture, is very different from the story that I hear and the world hears about Bharat. And this chasm, this almost schizophrenic existence that we are something in corporate and something outside, began to gnaw at my conscience ever since about 2012, 2013. Intellectually, of course, there was always an interest to understand history and people and traditions and culture. It became more purposive and directed since 2013 and 14. By 2017, the questions became urgent, and whatever I'm doing now is actually an extension of being honest to those questions. Once the questions are serious enough, then you need to do something about it, and that's when I moved out. I'll cover something else, but let's listen to Pankaj.
Over to you, Pankaj.
Thank you, Raghavji. I thought if you could throw some more light on what happened after that, your experiences within the Intic sphere, or you would want to go about it later.
We can, we can, and maybe that's easier as well. So when the intellectual exploration began, you're looking for answers. The questions are obvious. What is Bharat's real story? What is our place in the world? And how have we come to be where we are? And why are we not exerting or getting the kind of recognition that we think we deserve? Right? And these questions are common to all of us. Every single person that I speak to, particularly people of my age, they've all gone through similar experiences of having first lost in themselves and then trying to find ourselves. Right? So then. as always, the story that was given to you was that we have a wonderful constitution, we have a great tradition of freedom struggle, and if only we can arrest corruption, and which is basically at the political level, and if you could actually fix the public policy that comes out of that, then we are set because we have all the instruments. It's the people that needed to change. That's the story that you hear. And I bought that story for a couple of years. I was I was naive enough to think that just tinkering a few things around policy areas is actually the solution. And there is great value in that. We need to also acknowledge that. But as I explored that a little bit further, Pujit, I realized that what we call a public policy is a function of a political and institutional culture. And that political and institutional culture is downstream of certain ideas. Like whatever idea you can think of, you can think of equality, you can think of justice, you can think of all the big words that we hear. There is a central metaphysics to this, from where the institutions draw their identity, and there they get consolidated as policies, and that downstream becomes an administrative culture, and that establishes the relationship between people and the state. Unfortunately, in our case, and this is now obvious, but it was not so clear back then, about 5 years ago, that the metaphysics that we draw from is not ours. It actually belongs to a certain place, at a certain time in Europe. And whatever our discourse is, and it's also the tyranny of language, the language that you and I are also having this exchange in, that language actually creates that cultural consciousness. It obviously has meanings and values attached to those. Through an accident of history and through much design of our own, we've landed with a situation where our culture and the way we understand ourselves is very different from the story that we get from institutions. So it's almost like this Janus-faced existence that we have, that you are something to yourself and you're something else in a public space. Right? And that's when I began to explore beyond public policy and political philosophy into the metaphysics or into the core philosophy. And that's where I began my tryst with Indian knowledge systems. A lot of work that we do here is also that. I would say ever since 2018, my intellectual and spiritual anchor has been in Indian knowledge systems. And I co founded a school of public leadership as part of that, to pioneer a leadership development course focused on public policy but grounded in Indian knowledge systems. I had to move out of that for some reasons, but the work that we do at Bṛhat as a congruence of policy, cultural storytelling, and leadership development, which is about human development, is also an extension of the experiences and the conviction I've had from those experiences.
Thank you for that, Raghav ji. So we will hear from Pankaj ji and then move on to the next set of questions.
Yeah.
My story as such is not very interesting. I'd like to quote Premchand when somebody asked him about, because a lot of authors of his age would be writing about their own lives and autobiographies and autobiographical material. And when he was asked, and I would like to use because he wrote beautifully in Hindi also. Then he answered why he doesn't write about his own life, and he answered, uh, मेरे जीवन में ना तो बहुत ऊंची पहाड़ियां हैं ना बहुत गहरी खाइयां हैं, ये तो एक समतल सा मैदान है, इसमें शायद ही किसी को कोई आनंद आएगा. तो my story is not that complex, because at a very early age I found some solace. Before meeting my guru, I would only like to notice just one single detail. I met my guru at the age of 18. That was a seminal defining moment in my life. It still is the most defining moment. Before that, I would only like to notice one single detail, that when I was around 9, I discovered quite accidentally literature, and Russian literature at first. And after that, everything hinged on that. The real life stopped mattering much to me. Whenever it got a little uncomfortable or something which I didn't like, I would very easily, like in a fairy tale universe of my own, I would slid into the world of literature. So, and that's how it continued for the next 9 years, until I doubled in my age, became 18, and landed at the, as they say in our tradition, at the lotus feet of my guru. And he basically, then I didn't have to think. In whole of my life, most of the years of my life, I didn't have to think much about myself because I have had such stellar guidance. As soon as I met my guru, he basically just took hold of. Uh, it would be laughable to call it a career, but my life and the journey that I took after that. So he took charge and he led me on the path. So he gave me, when I met him at that time, because at that time everyone was a communist or something left liberal. So I had also become that because that was also fashionable. Because and also because those people had the sense, they subsidized books, even children's books, and in that they distributed very communist, very leftist, liberal literature. And in Gwalior, I was born and brought up in, and as some like to say, brought down also in Gwalior. So in that small city, very small city, the only books that I could buy outside the textbooks, which are not meant to read. So the only books which I could buy was when Gwalior Mela was held once in a year, and in that the communists held from Soviet Union, they held a stall of books in which they sold books so cheap, even coffee and tea was costlier than those books. So that's how I started reading, that's how I started studying literature. And the beautiful thing about that, it was not just propaganda, it was just 2 or 3% of propaganda mixed with great literature, mixed with translations of great literature from all over the world. They would cater in regional languages. I was it was Madhya Pradesh, so there were, of course, books in Hindi. So and that is why I had become a communist, reading those wonderful literary books in which there was always this subliminal sympathy with the downtrodden, the marginalized, the oppressed. So those paradigms were all there. So I had become a communist because one of the friends of my father had no clue about any of this, and thankfully, so he, in that way, he led a blissful life. But one of his friends, he was political, and he was a great communist. So he introduced me to all this paradigm. So when I met my guru, very uh, not exactly literally, but he held me by my ear and brought me back to Hinduism. And he would ask me very harsh questions based on my worldview at that time. Of course, I was not able to put up a very rational, logical counter to that. And he was very harsh, very rude. He would he would tell anyone whether he was an idiot or not, very clearly in these words, in Hindi. So, but I didn't care any of that because he had all the answers. He still is the most well-read person that I've ever met in my life. So he told me about all of this. He introduced me mainly Voice of India publications to the works of the great, I call him the greatest philosopher to come out of 20th century from Bharatvarsh, Sri Ram Sarup Ji. He introduced me to the works of Sri Ram Sarup Ji, then Sitaram Goel Ji, and all other, including Conrad Elst, Sri David Foley, who is also known as Sri Vamadev Shastri, N.S. Rajaram, Srikant Talagiri, Harsh Narayan, Jaideep Majumdar, and a lot of scholars like that. So I was introduced to the religious, cultural, social, civilizational paradigm. I was acquainted with the phenomena that is prophetic monotheism, and religions are not just standalone religions in themselves. I got to know that there are two broad categories: one that of prophetic monotheism, another that of natural religions or dharmic sects like uh, Hindu Dharma, or the religion of natural religion of China and Japan, and sects like that, tribal religions like that. So I was introduced to the work. I was very, very surprised initially to find great depth also in philosophy. They were not just criticizing what we are not, but they were able to give a very good idea of what being a Hindu means. Especially if you read the works of Sri Ram Sarup Ji, you can find the greatest of depths in philosophy, in aesthetics, in the very act of reading and writing. And so I was introduced to all of this. So after that, there are some 2 decades to traverse in between. But all of those details are incidental and not very important. In a way, I was reading, writing, I was venturing inside the movement because after having read Voice of India for 1 year, more than 1 year, my guru told me that now a great weapon has come for the voiceless, and that weapon is internet. That Hindus who hitherto had absolutely no voice in mainstream newspapers or media, academia, or politics, or in general public social space, now they have a way to speak. And surprisingly, he never had a computer in his hand. or a laptop in his hand, but he somehow knew all of this. So he sent me. At that time, it was you had to sell half your property to buy a computer, so nobody had computers at home. So he internet had just arrived in a city like Gwalior. So he would send me to the only internet cafe there used to be. Kids these days would be surprised to know that you had to go out to get internet. But yes, we had to stand in queues for 2 hours to get to a portal, a computer where we could do internet for 1 hour or so. And
They were called cyber cafes or something.
cyber cafes, internet cafes, and cyber cafes. In small tier cities, even the word cyber was not known, so it was internet and cafes. So internet cafes. So he would send me daily to that, and he said that the Hindus can find a voice here, and whatever you have studied, whatever you have understood about your culture, civilization, and society, you can discuss all of that here. Find others like you, or those who are neutral but are willing to listen. You can tell them all of this. Basically, you can spread awareness to become like a lamp, to become like a diya. Whatever little you know now through the agency of great gurus like Sri Ram Sarup ji and Sri Sita Ram Goyal ji, you should be able to spread it to more people who should know but who do not know now. So this is what we would do. I would At that time I didn't even have any vehicle. Gwalior was a small enough city, but even there were distances like 6 or 7 kilometers from my home to the internet cafe. So he bought me a bicycle, and I would cycle to that internet cafe daily and do this for 2 hours. Basically, there was no Orkut, Facebook, or Twitter. It was now when you see it, it feels you can feel even very depressed that at that time there was nothing, no Facebook, no Twitter, no YouTube, no Orkut. Even there were Yahoo chat rooms, static Yahoo pages and Yahoo chat rooms in which people basically were there for dating. And so I would disturb these people looking for dates, and I would tell them, do you want to know about Islam or Christianity? And just like any other credit card seller is shooed away, people would say, go away, get out. And after 20, 30 such rejections, one another person who could not get a date would say, chalo isi ke saath aaj ki shaam spend kar lete hain. And he would agree to talk to me. And whatever I had known till then about anything about our movement, I would just offload it completely to him. uh, and this continued for years. Now it seems very tragicomic, because you have to be stupid to be able to pull those kind of things, because if you are very pragmatic and very practical, you would weigh all the pros and cons, and you will never do it. So I was, of course, young and naive. Well, at least the youth part is over now. So at that time, because I was both young and naive, so I kept doing that without thinking about how my career would turn. Who thought about career? Especially in Gwalior, nobody spoke it the way career. They called it carrier, which was used to be at the back of the bicycle. So we were familiar with that kind of carrier, and that was not much to worry about. It was you could get a bicycle for around 2,000, and there was a carrier which came with it. So I had absolutely no idea of what my life is going to turn out to be. But at that time, because so few people had careers, especially in the financial uh, class that I was a part of, that I thought, even if it ever crossed my mind, the worst thought, okay, so maybe I will not have a career. But that's not such a rare thing. Half of the people around me don't have a career. So you will live somehow, but that's okay. So, and that's only times when it crossed my mind. This was the thought that crossed my mind. Otherwise, it never
The
did.
main thing was getting a job. Like काम job होना चाहिए बस
Yeah,
घर.
my guru had told me, that I will take care of your food and lodging and clothing. You tell your family you are dead to them. So I did. So that do not expect anything from me, but I will also not be a burden on you. And that is how things used to happen in Bharatvarsha. So you don't take anything from the family, but if you are in for in a movement or a cause like this, you also tell them that you are of no help to them also. So I told them that, and my guru said that I will never let you starve. And at that point of time, that was more than enough promise, and he always kept that promise. So he sent me to various things to do, various ventures, which now seems like fool's errands. But it is through every step that I took, every stupid thing that I did, that I was led to the creation of Bṛhat 9 months ago. Because people like to divide their lives in successes and failures. And it's funny, because if you just take one failure away, from that story, the entire story collapses, including all the successes that are a part of that. So I would not like to change anything in my past, not because everything was good, but because if I change even a single bad thing, everything else in the story changes. And I certainly do not want to change whatever I have now, whatever wherever I am now. So the next 18, 19 years, I basically never held a job outside the movement. Like I was doing something, a job in engineering or any other thing, and then moonlighting as a Hindu warrior in the night. Nothing like that. I was that sunlighting also like that. If that was any, if that is any phrase or that is anything. So, but stumbling upon a few things in 2012, I was the co-founder of an organization called India Inspires. So we started for the first time. We started the trend of inviting Hindu scholars who were working on the real history, culture, and civilization of Bharatvarsh from a native indigenous point of view, like Meenakshi Jainji, like Dr. Kapil Kapoor, Bharat Guptji, Shrikant Talagiri. Shrikant Talagiri, people saw him for the first time. There was not even a photo available of him before we invited him from Mumbai to Indore and shot him in the videos on Iron Invasion Theory. Conrad Elst, N.S. Rajaram. So we recorded talks of around 35 to 40 such scholars. There were three other co-founders with me in that organization. So for the next 4 or 5 years, I was in that, and I was a part of that. Um, After that, I worked in Indus University, Ahmedabad, with the Center for Indic Studies, where I also helped creating courses on Indic issues, IKS, Indian Knowledge Systems. Dr. Kapil Kapoorji, Rajneesh Mishraji, Bharat Guptji, and Sri Rajiv Malhotra, all of these scholars we work with. So after working 5 years, I shifted to Sonipat, where I met, and that is where the story was leading to, because in a way I was always looking for someone like Raghav Krishna ji, in a sense that the energies that I have, whatever I can bring to the table, he can make use of it. So, and make use of it in a good way. So, in a way, it was all happening so that we could meet and start something new. And things didn't work out there, but it was for a better cause, because uh, a lot of us came out of there and created Brhat. And that's how the story started. And our statement is that we are trying to, just like Raghavji indicated in his talk earlier, that India's there is difficulty because India's policy is not conducive to its culture, to its indigenous native culture, and the attempt here is to connect India's policy to culture. When we were starting, he will of course guide in a much better way, more deeply and more beautiful words. But when we started this, we were warned to not link culture and policy, because that's not how it is done. You should keep policy apart. If you are a policy think tank, you should keep culture apart. If you are a cultural organization, you should not mix it. But the insistence of Raghavji was that this is exactly what we want to change. We want to connect them. We want policy to flow from culture, and that is the idea that was at the core of Bṛhat. Of course, there are a lot of other human stories, individual stories. None of this would have worked if there was no great trust between the individuals, great friendship, great camaraderie, great relationships between the individuals. So that is also there. But this is how Bṛhat started. We were on completely different paths. My world was entirely different. I had never even entered a corporate office. I still cannot imagine to. So, and a lot of other things that happened to Raghavji, it is completely different to me. I was in a completely different Dickensian world, and his world was entirely different. But uh, when we met, it didn't even feel like our experiences were different in that sense. And because his understanding of the movement was very deep, in that sense that he understood what the currents were, what the ground is, what the problems are, and what the structure is, what the meta level structure is. And when we started discussing, when he started telling me that what problems does he see with it, of course we connected very naturally, and I thought that here I could make some contribution. Thank you.
So I just loved listening to your individual stories, and like you rightly pointed out, two lives couldn't have been more different. Raghavji's beginnings in Hyderabad and his experience in the gaming world, and yours in MP Gwalior, and spiritual awakening at such a young age. So very, very different worlds, but that's the power of Sankalpa. And like you rightly pointed out, I think Raghavji brings technology wherewithal. He has, I think, sort of what can I say, expertise in his many years of gaming and all of that is the idea of how you can use the technology and the strategy to bring to give fruition to the ideas that you have. So that's just wonderful. And so my what I would like to ask you all is, since it's a devil's advocate that I'm playing here, is a typical question that I'm sure it's a very one-on-one question. Any any 21st century person is going to ask you, well, we already have so much information out there. It's the 21st century. Do we need to go back into the past? Do we need to bring these thousands of years of history and all the other things which to them may seem irrelevant? Do we need this right now? So what would your answer be to these naysayers?
So I think the question has two levels, right? One is the overarching need for looking back at your own civilizational identity. What is the need for that? And secondly, why do we need another organization if there are people who are already working on it? What is it that we add? I think the quest for identity is a very primal one, whether you recognize this or not. Like I said, in my own experience, and for me, the pramana is not just what we read, but what is the truth of your experience. It is not so much about how much you've read or what you've read and what you haven't, but you can take an extraordinary amount of insight from whatever you read if you are able to blend that with the truth of your own experience. And I do this not because I have some great insight, having read a lot, or I'm definitely not guilty of that. But your life was okay, right? You found your love, you found your job, you have I have a wonderful daughter, and everything was great, right? You're also in a creative industry, in my own experience. But in all of us, I had experienced it back then, and ever since I've moved into this full time, I've met countless people, Pujita, so many people who've they told me the exact same thing, that there is that ache, there is that void, right? And we are experiencing it because we know that our story is not complete. So this is not a grand question about whether we need to do it for civilization. I'm saying at a very personal, human, individual level, this need to know where you belong is a primordial one. You cannot escape it, even if you try to reason yourself out of it. Your mind has limitations. Your cultural DNA, your racial DNA, your natural evolution, all of those are far more powerful influences. So this quest for identity, I think this question itself is a naive question coming from people who haven't examined their own lives, because you're trying to intellectualize and analyze something out there. If you make yourself as the instrument, and if you make your own experience as the conduit, you will understand that if it's not some other civilizational identity, you are giving yourself a new identity, but you're still doing that. Bharat Gupji, because Pankaj mentioned his name, he writes about it beautifully. It is a ritual universe. The whole universe is kept in its place because there are certain rituals. That's what we call Rata, whatever metaphysics we have. When you take that away, you still have to replace that with secular rituals like your flag, like your freedom day. Do we question that? We do not question that because we understand that the bond is forged through the embers of those rituals, through those symbols. It is just that we are exchanging one identity for another. The question is, what is the ephemeral and what is the eternal? When we talk about the civilizational identity, we are talking about harking back to the eternal identity, especially in the Hindu metaphysics, especially in the Sanatan Dharma culture. You get to hold on to something that is truly intransient for the first time, perhaps in your life, when you hold that thread of Dharma. And when you hold that thread of Dharma, it is a very natural expression. You are not intellectualizing that anymore. Your entire path becomes very clear. Right? So, the way where I locate the need for this is not just at some meta level. There are, of course, civilizational battles, there are nation state battles, and we can look at that. That's why we also look at public policy, because the state is ultimately the instrument for the collective expression, and we need to be very, very clear about it. But the story is not about the state, it is not out there. The story is really about the individual, about the fundamental impulse that we have. So my answer is that. So once that is there, then it's a question of whether you have something original to contribute. If you're looking at a new organization, why Brighat, right? Clearly in both Pankaj's story and my story, like we discussed, we didn't have anything in common. If you were to present an idea to Silicon Valley investor today, particularly the whole Y Combinator, culture that they have, they talk about how many miracles do you need to succeed, and no investor invests money if you need more than one miracle. This is a Silicon Valley rule. If you need two miracles, then your pitch is off. So you can only talk about one miracle, right? So that is that in a product development world, we are arrogant, we are smug about such pithy phrases, right? When you look at life, when you look at actually what's happening in your own experience, how many miracles did it need for us to even meet? How many miracles does it need for us to come together? How many miracles does it need for me to tell this story to you, in a fashion that I can say I represent something meaningful? So that is, and when you understand that, that is the true dharmic way of thinking. That is the consonance between your manasa, vacha, karmana. Is that established? Are you representing it? When your answer to that question is true, then your organization is true, then your purpose is true. So I would say the basis for this, again, the I don't look for validation. I look for support, I look for collaboration, I look for compounding. But the validation comes from my own antakarna, and that is the only way I can think about organizations. There can be a strategic landscape. I speak that language of strategy all the time, but that is just a ancillary. That is something that is required to make sure that what you are attempting becomes successful. But the truth of that comes from within you. So my organization, Pankaj's organization, all of us at Bṛhat, we are here because we are clear in our own antakarana, and we have, I think, the trikarana should be required to do something positive in this. That is the validation.
Uh,
Would you like to add something,
yeah,
Pankaj?
if I'd like to add just a few lines to it. So we talk about dharma, we talk about tradition at Bṛhat. And tradition, if in one phrase, if you want to define it, tradition is that, parampara is that which continues. The very essence of a tradition is that which continues. And Hindu dharma is called as sanatan dharma. So the literal translation would be just like the book of Sri Vamdev Shastri was, the subtitle, the eternal tradition. So Sanatan Dharma is not old. Sanatan Dharma is not new. Sanatan Dharma is that which always is. So about IKS, Dr. Kapil Kapurji quotes another scholar and says that IKS is like Sanatan Ganga Prava. Now, what is a river in flow? What is a great river like Ganga in flow? It's always the same and yet never the same. Like that famous metaphor of Greek metaphor, if you put your foot, you can never put your foot inside a river twice, because the next time you do it, it's an entirely different array of molecules of water. So every time it is, every second it is changing and yet always the same. That is what Sanatan Dharma is, that is what tradition is. And that is the only thing which is alive. If you cut down a river into a pool like we do when we make a dam on a river, when it becomes a lake, its life as such dies because it stagnates. So if the flow, if the change stops, then it stagnates. It becomes something like ossified rules, a group of rules, a community of rules, like many communities in the Middle East. And if it is always changing, with continuing nothing from the past, then it is like nihilism, where you're the only thing, the very statement of Dada, one movement in art, Dadaism, is the only art is to keep destroying art, because they saw the problem as anything which is comes from the past is evil. So all you have to do is to keep destroying the old, because whatever they tried creating new, somebody found something old in it. Because how can there something be entirely new? It has to, by its very character as being alive, it has to have something from the past. And so they said their statement is the only art is to keep destroying the art, there is nothing else. So either you become nihilist or you become stuck in ossified rules. But Sanatan Dharma, like always, is that great thermostat, the universal thermostat, the great balancer, which is some not in between, which always creates balance. Sanatan Dharma is always about harmony, about balance. That to continue the universal elements which are always there, and yet to always keep adapting to the local place and time. So all our shastras, all our scriptures are also like that. They always instruct to pay attention to the local, to the regional, but there is always some universal principles, universal siddhanta, which never change. Because, and this is what I wanted to say, anything which is not continuous cannot be alive. We are alive, we exist because we are continuous. There is an continuity in our existence. Because if you go deeper into meditation and into spiritually into finding your own true identity, you are once again and again told to pay attention to things which do not have continuity. And the moment you arrive at that which never breaks down, that which is always continuous, that's the only thing alive. So if you're saying you want to carry nothing from the past, that means that thing is not alive, which carries nothing from the past, as I also displayed. Because if you adopt that principle like Dada, then your only goal is to keep destroying, you are creating nothing. So by the very uh, dint of existing, by the very virtue of existing, you have to continue the universal that's in the past and to keep adapting, adding, subtracting as the time and place demands. So both of these things are to be at the same time. As an institution working in the service of IKS, this is also our mantra, so to say. Thank you.
That is what you both said. In fact, what you said about the river, right? Comparing the river, and that's why we worship the river. The idea of the river, everything in our philosophy, our thought, the river, the sagara, everything makes, it's always a repetitive symbol, right? And I think I remember Rajiv ji, I think, who said that riverine civilizations, they're different. You look at the Indic civilization, you look at Egypt, as opposed to the desert civilizations. They're static. They're not stuck in the past. So yes, it is important to be able to push that. The idea has to go forward. I mean, it's just. And what you said about Dadaism, and I think if you look at the societies that come from, or the society that those ideas came from, like communism, for example, is again very destructive in nature. So, right. My next question was about your, a little bit more, if you could tell us about, the knowledge system, IKS courses that you've developed. And you've three verticals: culture, creatives, policy research, and leadership research, pardon me. So could you talk a little bit about cultural creatives? And you have some projects like the Brighat Anveshi Scrolls of Aryavarta. Sounds very interesting. So could you throw some light on these projects in this particular vertical of cultural creatives and details of
Sure, sure. Thank you for that, because it gives me an opportunity to explain not just what we're doing, but also the thinking behind all of these things. Because for us, these are not separate, distinct, disparate things. For us, cultural storytelling, policy making, and leadership development are one unified whole. There are a couple of you could call that assumptions, but I would argue that they are reasoned arguments, which direct our work. One is understanding the mega trends at play today. We are going through a phase as a global culture today where all of our meaning making is influenced rather asymmetrically by the images and the videos and the digital content and the storytelling that we gather through that. This is a very subliminal neurological process. When we try to explain our culture, culture is a series of life processes. For me, there is a direct connection between the cow, the community that actually holds that. I understand the process of how they extract the milk. I understand how it comes, because this is what we've grown up seeing. But for my kid today, growing up in a urban apartment in Hyderabad, that life process has been replaced by a product on the shelf. And this means that we do not have the word idea associations. And you also have the problem of a global language which obfuscates your regional uniqueness. So we are going through this phase where all of our meaning making is happening in a language that is not our own, and you do not have life process or access to living things, which at least can help you have a perspective. I've understood this being in games. The kind of neurological hardwiring that we were able to do by supplying interesting, immersive experiences, curated very deeply, and all the time talking to you personally. I might be serving the same game to 3 million players, but I have a very minute understanding of the individual preferences because I'm able to glean the data to understand the heat map of a player choice. At this level of sophistication, and this is now compounded by everything else that has happened in the AI and other related industries, we are actually going through a profound moment of evolution without even recognizing this. So today, when we try and talk about life process, when we try and talk about culture, we are talking to an audience which does not have the same registry that we did. So the cultural storytelling will is important because we have made the personal as the ideological. If you look at the one big trend, people follow something not because they are 100% committed to that ideology. In fact, I would argue that ideology comes out as a function of a creative self expression. We are going through a performative culture. If I get to partake and through that have some story of my own that I can project, then that becomes whatever ideology gives me the venue to do that becomes my ideology. And this is the power of liberal atheism, Pujit, in my this one, and I've mentioned this elsewhere as well, right? You have a combination of Western nation states for whom it is a foreign policy tool to weld cultural attitudes and behaviors and tastes and aspirations entire world. That gives direct access to markets, that gives economic power, that gives the technological leverage because you also understand the data from all of the billions of people who are using that. That gives you the creative freedom because your products are also getting consumed all over the world. And all of that serves only one thing, it serves as a moral sanction for our indulgence. We are individuals looking for meaning making and the culture is telling you that meaning making today comes from consumption, and the consumption has certain economic dimension to it, right? So if we have to locate what we call an indic movement in this context, you cannot do this unless you worm your way through their mind and their neural pathways, that you have to re-architect, you have to replace the current images that they have about the stories in their head. Very quick example to explain what I think this is, right? When we try and say explain something like a Ram Janmabhoomi, growing up, Ram Janmabhoomi had a natural emotion in all of us. There was a way to architect a pan Hindu, pan India movement by the sheer strength of that one word. Right? Today, people look for personal association. They will care about a place, they will care about a story if it is something that they are also able to attach their story to. And it is not for us to morally judge that. It is part of the cultural transmission that's happening. Our challenge is how do we actually make sure that this place has a personal meaning to our own people. If you're going through anxiety, if you're going through depression, if you're going through a moment of self doubt, if you're going through a breakup, if you're experiencing heartbreak, what is that place that comes to mind? What is that story that comes to mind? What is that metaphor that comes to mind? If that metaphor is yours, if it is supplied from your culture, if that place is within your landscape, and if that story is coming from your literature, then you can transmit culture. And only when people experience it deeply will they care about that place. If that story is connected to me, the next time something happens to that place, I care about it. This is what we mean by policy currency for cultural issues. You cannot demand it just like that. It will happen when people identify and attach themselves to that. And that is the part of cultural storytelling, to supply meaning through our metaphors, our words, our associations. Pankaj will talk about a project he is conceiving for Hindi and how we want to do that. And
If I may interject,
yeah, sure.
what you said is so profound and so true, and I'm sure it has come from years of having studied this. Because you've addressed something that is very core, Raghavji, and we see the symptoms of it
Yeah,
in things like Instagram
yeah,
and social media platforms where it's become everybody's a hero, everybody's a protagonist, everybody's telling their own story. So it's about that individual. It's
yeah,
no longer about looking to some other hero or looking to someone outside of their
yeah.
milieu. They themselves are the storytellers of their own stories.
Yes.
So So the whole dynamic has shifted so much. And what you said about finding, finding stories for their problems, like
Yeah,
you said, someone going through a breakdown.
yeah,
I find that even today you have people referring to Friends, episodes from Friends,
yeah,
or referring to, some TV show
yeah,
which was popular in the 90s.
yeah,
Yeah, nobody's talking about Ramayana, or
yeah,
when I had a breakup, I thought about Sita in
yeah,
her Vanvas,
yeah.
or Sita in
Yeah.
I mean, so that is, I think, core is to be able
Absolutely.
to and bring the people back to those ideas and those.
Absolutely. So the pursuit is always the same, joy. Vairagya is Vairagya. That separation from beloved is the separation from beloved. Right? But in an earlier generation, literature from your regional language, stories from your landscape supplied that meaning. Today, you're drawing that from the global pool. And you're doing that in visual mediums, you're doing it in interactive mediums. And in interactive mediums, you are the hero. The difference between even something as powerful as a movie and something like a game is that in a movie you're still consuming somebody else's vision. Might be a great vision, but you're still receiving it. Right? But in a game, you get the illusion of being the creator of your own destiny because you are the character. That's why it's far more powerful. These mediums, and because we look at culture from human interactions and the meaning making that is happening through those interactions, it is very important that at a print level, at a digital video level, at a event level, at a political level, and at a social level, we absolutely imbue this consciousness with our stories and with our images. When that happens, then there is a natural awareness and awakening which translate into a policy demand. That is when the politics responds. Politics will never lead, politics will always follow. They will respond to what is the signal that they get from the society, while also manipulating that signal, right? But the only way to stop that manipulation and to send the right signal is to make these stories deeply personal. The strength we have is that once the story becomes personal, because it is a performative era, people will talk about it by themselves, people will spread it by themselves. If you supply the meaning, they will amplify it. This is the premise. Once that is done, it is not enough by itself. You need to translate this into some kind of a state level initiative, which is the policy idea. Currently, our work on policy is on education and ecology. We see these two as the pillars for advancing Sanatan Dharma, apart from, of course, the institution which holds all of this together, which is the temple. Right? So, our work with Indian knowledge systems to build curriculum, to try and aid faculty development programs, to build competencies, to actually do a public communication design, talk to parents, talk to young students about these choices, talk to industry and help them understand why this is a better way of investing in human development when you think about these knowledge systems. That is the idea. Both these things, Pujita, will not happen unless you have a set of people who embody this and who have the lifelong commitment to endure in this. That is the third part of our work, something that gives Pankaj and I the greatest joy, is the ability to mentor young people and create opportunities for them to be in this long haul. So that for me, I've come into this by accident. I don't want the same level of protracted divergence for my kids if I can help it. Right? And if I can avoid that, that is the greatest thrill that I have through my work. That somebody does not have to make the same mistakes to learn what I've learned. So those are the three areas. That's why it's a compact. You cannot separate the cultural story from policy. You cannot separate the policy from the person, and you cannot actually do both cultural storytelling or knowledge systems without investing in people. That's how we look at it.
Pankaj, would you like to speak about the particular project that Anveshi, was it?
Uh,
Bṛhat, Anveshi, the scrolls of
Anvesh,
Narendra.
Anveshi is a different program. Anveshi is like our Drashta courses are online learning courses. Later on, they will also be offline, where we directly, it is under the leadership vertical, where we directly convey to the next generation what we try to collate and learn ourselves. Anveshi is the experiential part of it, where very immersive experience where we take people in on ground and make them acquaint, throw them with Hindu ecosystems. How do they work? And how does that system actually mean on real ground with individuals working inside it? So that is Anveshi. This what we are going to do. It will be a program. We are soon going to release its name and with all the branding. But this program is attempting to bring back the ability to talk in our own languages. It is going to attempt that because, and it is going to attempt a few regional languages, Kshetri Bhasha. Uh, I noticed one thing when I started living in apartments after my kid was born. Because for I started the first 300-400 books that I read in life were all in Hindi because I was born in Hindi heartland, and so the first 300-400 books, fortunately at that time it was still the language of reading and writing, and I they were all Hindi literature, Hindi Sahitya. After that, because I graduated to disciplines which would discuss issues and principles, Siddhanta, of course I had to read in English because that was the language that had become the language. But when I became a father, when my son was born, and I started living in society's apartments, I noticed a curious change that nobody was speaking. It was not just about Hindi. Nobody was speaking their own tongues. Parents were speaking to their children completely in English, and even the elders, while talking between themselves and even to their parents, while claiming that they were speaking their native language like Hindi, Gujarati, Telugu, they were virtually using the structure of the Bharati Bhasha and supplanting all the nouns, adjectives, and adverbs of English or some other language. So we are virtually speaking English by using the grammatical structure of Hindi, let's say in my case. We still use a grammatical structure because the prepositions and confuse us and the phrasal verbs. So we use the grammatical structure of Hindi and use virtually English with it. फॉर एग्जाम्पल ये से इसका ओरिजिन क्या है, इसका एंड क्या है, हमें ये फाइंड आउट कर लेना चाहिए. इवन द एंटायर स्टॉक phrases we started using in English. So I thought, where is Hindi in this? It is as if somebody changed the very seed of that language, very beej of that language. So as if the Shiva Tattva is gone, and the entire beach, the entire seed of its civilization, which is contained in the evolution and the life of a bhasha, of a language, the entire seed is changed. So that was a very depressing thought. If this is how crippled we have become in talking in our own language within a lifetime. Because I remember my childhood when I started learning the English script, there were there was a decade of my life I remember only in Hindi, in which I scarcely knew a single word of English. We, I studied in so-called English medium, but thankfully, due to the inefficiency of our education system during those times, they were unable to impart us anything beyond just the ability
Actually,
to read the script. And I was so thankful. Actually, it was due to their inefficiency that my childhood was so pleasant. Had they become efficient like the Delhi public and all those public schools now, the life would be hell. Because when I see at those kids and when I see at my life was absolute. My childhood was absolutely good when it came to schooling, because I just knew how to read the script, but apart from that, we didn't understand a single word of English. So there was an entire decade of my life, and I'm not. Yes, I'm old, but not like 300-400 years old. So, one decade of my life, the first decade, I spent it without using a single word of English. And when it came to explaining things to my kid, I found myself fumbling for Hindi words and trying to explain to him with Hindi Vyakaran and in English. So that struck me as something that this is cultural degradation of a kind, which will not be reversible if we do not become conscious of it now. No amount of philosophy, no amount of darshan that we study is going to save dharma in practice, which we do at home, if we are unable to transfer rituals and languages as they were handed out to us. It is our responsibility. That's what tradition is. Being a Sanatani, being a Hindu means that which was handed to you, you take care of it, nurture it, nourish it, and pass it on to the next generation. And prepare the next generation so they are able to carry this burden. It is like a relay race. Culture is a relay race. To carry dharma is a relay race. So you are doing nothing new, doing nothing very great. You're just holding the baton and you're passing it on to the next generation. So that's when the thought came that how did this happen, and how to change it. So the silver lining is Shakti as in Vyakaran. There is a view in which Shakti is also in the Bij, because Shakti arises from Bij mantra. the goddess arises and resides in the beach mantras. But Shakti, as the structure of language, as Vyakaran, it is still alive, and we can use that structure. The manifestation is still there. We can use that structure to bring back the seeds, because the muscle memories are still there. We all within our living memory have our kshatriya bhasha in our brain. We can, if we consciously put our mind and effort to it for a few months, even few weeks and months, we will be able to bring back our ability to talk about concepts and ideas, deep issues, concepts and ideas and frameworks within in your own language. So with that, a thought came that we will revisit Hindi literature mainly, but also other literatures, because the first season of this program will be in Hindi literature. We have within Brhat we are heavy in two languages, Kshatriya Bhasha, Hindi and Telugu. So we'll attempt these first two languages first. So we will revisit Hindi literature in a language which will be fate free. Fate free means we will try to keep it as free as possible of Farsi, Arabic, Turkish, and English, because fat people are aware of, and now a few people they try to keep their Hindi free of that. But English has scrapped so much in the past 2 decades that it's virtually impossible to do it without English, to speak Hindi without English. So the effort here will be to be able to speak Hindi in extremely simple, because the first principle is also simplicity. Any language for common use, for relaxed use, has to be free, has to be simple. So it will be simple, but it will be very Sanskritnist Hindi, because in our civilization culture, Sanskrit was the language, Sanskrit was the culture which kept the universal tattva alive in any language. So the regional and the local always kept changing according to the circumstances. That was the vernacular folk culture. But the Sanskrit element, the Sanskrit beej, seed was always alive. So Sanskrit Nisht Hindi, which will also connect it to other regional languages, keep its identity separate, but also help it in navigating and making friends with other languages, other regional languages of Bharatvarsh. So a Hindi which is free in that, free of these words, a Hindi which is very simple, a Hindi which is given first of all to creation of ananda, creation of pleasure, because we want to cultivate the habit of a rasik and a nagrik in our audience. For we were encouraged to be rasik. We were not an insipid culture. So when people talk about this penance and all, it's okay. It's always there. As Dr. Riji Mishra says, the character of every discipline in Bharatvarsh is to take people from bhed to abhed. So always to take them to a higher plane of consciousness. But that was done by embracing all the pleasure in the world. So Shantras is not devoid of all rasas, it contains all the rasas. So it is where all the rasas arise from and also merge into. So we enjoyed the world. We were encouraged to be rasik, to take ras, to take ananda in life. The very definition of Nagrik was very different. Nagrik now is just a denotatory term of those who live in Nagar, those who live in cities. But that was not so. For example, I will differentiate between a Bhakt and a Nagrik. When a Bhakt goes to a Devalaya, to a Devasthana, to a Mandir, to a temple, his primary goal is to have darshan standing in front of the Garbhagriha inside the Mandap, and that is his primary goal. How beautiful the sculpture is, how beautiful architecture is, how meaningful it is, that is all immaterial to him. He might notice it, he might not notice it. His purpose and goal is to, which is the primary purpose of temple going, is to have darshan inside the Garbhagriha. But like Sanatan Dharma is a hold all, my guru used to say it is a hold all, because that was a term in electric shops. There was a holder of which was a hold all in which all kinds of sockets were there. So no matter whatever plug you had, that hold all will be a receiver of all sorts of plugs. So Sanatan Dharma, he used to say, is a hold all. It does not have just the space for the gyanis, it also has a space for what they call as sinners, or in our civilization, as we used to call those who like to take interest in the world and who like to immerse themselves in it, who like to comment upon it. So they will use the word connoisseur but not rasik. So I like not to use the word connoisseur. Rasik is our term. And Nagrik was the person. So if a Nagrik would visit a temple, he would not just have darshan. Of course, he would have that too. But he will also notice how beautiful the Vigraha of Mahishasur Mardini on the outer wall is. He will also notice how beautiful paintings are etched on the ceiling of the mandapa, how beautiful the kumud is. He will also notice the symbolism of architecture. So, if you are a Nagrik, if you take pride in living in cities as a citizen, then according to Hindi aesthetics, you have to take interest in all of the world, all the while moving to higher planes of consciousness, which will be the goal of this program, to take interest in the world, to take absolute and full interest in the world, to take all the rasas from the world and yet move to a higher plane of consciousness. That will be the goal of this program. It will revisit Hindi literature in fate free Hindi, in which will be very simple and yet given to arising anand, bliss, in general, in audience and those who are also creating it. So that is the idea briefly.
If I can just sum it up, Pujita, and I could see the artist in you absolutely in agreement and almost partaking in the bliss, and we hope to live up to the expectation that we've set here. But the whole idea is to create different kind of opportunities for people to engage in their own culture. Like I said, the grand idea is to create meaning in your mind through an exposure to our words, our stories, our metaphors, our allegories. Drashta is where we do it as a civilizational leadership understanding. There, the idea is you need to know certain things intellectually to be able to call yourself a part of a civilizational movement. Anveshi is where we bring cultural interfaces and people together. If you look at a temple not just as a holiday spot or as a beautiful place, but if you understand the sacred grove, if you understand the socio-economic structure, if you understand the culture of that place, if you understand the art, the aesthetics, the philosophy, and finally, of course, the spiritual component of that, how do you bring all of this into a felt experience? That is Anveshi. Similarly, we have Brhat Mridang, which is our video series, where we do very small digestible components of high philosophy, which have actually been seamlessly integrated into everyday culture. We see these motifs, these symbols, these metaphors all around us, but we perhaps do not understand the central thing that they're all pointing to and how they're all in a consonance. So we try and explain this. We've done about 9 videos on that, and you would see that. Likewise, we do the idea of scrolls of Aryavarta, which you found interesting, was to have a creative way for people to look at narrativizing your own civilizational history in a collaborative manner using the power of AI and other technologies that you have today. Right? All of this is pointing to the same thing. The design of Bṛhat is also the same thing. Start from wherever you want to. If you are a student of history, on our Bṛhat online library, we've curated a set of readings for you. If you like the Itihasa Purana, we have a learning path for you. We also gave you a certain kind of meta framework called the Shatrubodh and Swayambodh, which we think are the twin wheels of this civilization. Know about yourself in all its entirety, political, aesthetic, social, cultural, spiritual. Also know the other, and the other here is also important to understand why you're distinct and how what you need to do to survive and thrive. All of these are pointing to the same need of building that civilizational mind of being able to collaborate. But these are all different venues, and the big project that we are undertaking now is to retether the whole idea of language, literature, consciousness, take it away from the political discourse that it seems to be stuck in, and put it where it belongs in the cultural discourse.
It all sounds very, very exciting, and I think also very unique from the other projects and other initiatives there are. I think every initiative is unique in its own way, but I think you've been able to bring in your larger vision not just culture, but you've very significantly been able to bring it to policy, leadership, people, and cultural values. So all of this coming together, I think, is what makes Brighat
and
special.
and that is possible because the design of the team is like that. So when Pankaj and I get to represent, and we look good by representing people who are much better than us. If you look at the team that is Bṛhat, you have people from very very different disciplines, all with that just one solidarity and absolute commitment to working in this space full time. And you have Cypria, who is actually a MBBS doctor by profession, but she's so deep in Hindu aesthetics. Most of her work was actually on researching Hindu art and architecture and temple traditions. She's studying law, right? So she also brings that perspective from law when she talks about issues. Now you have Anurag, who is a PhD in education, but one of the finest cultural curators that we have, at least to my knowledge in India today. Somebody who understands business, culture, education, and our philosophy extremely deeply. Kavita Garu, of course, comes from such wonderful, rich experience and intent, and the whole spiritual strength that we have personally as well. I draw from seeing this person who's going through transitions in life so gracefully, and that is the spiritual core, to be able to just live your life effortlessly. And I draw a lot of strength from her. You have Nivedita. She is an artist, a poet, and a performing artist. She is going through her own life journey, which is expressed as art, and a commitment to actually that process of transformation through art for herself and through her work for the multitude as well. So it's a team that brings all of these things together. Bṛhat is nothing but the people that we are, and therefore, when people say you are able to do these things, many things, it looks like there are many things. For me, yeah, I can understand where they come from. It looks a lot, but for us internally, we are just having a great time working on ideas that come naturally to us and supporting each other. And it seems to be, it seems to be working out, and we are able to be productive. We write a lot. We produce some videos. Produce ideas. We want to offer solutions. More importantly, we want to be that campfire that all creative people from our side can come together, can huddle up, discuss, and have a space to emerge with some kind of collective consciousness. That's very very important and critical to our value. The greatest strategic strength that I can think of is the ability to collaborate, is the ability to build common consensus, a common agenda, and when we think about leadership, that's what we are trying to architect.
This is also going to be my only concern would be that of course at some point it's going to go offline. So how are you looking at integrating this with government initiatives? Are you going to even venture in that area? Because we need to go ballistic with this,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No,
Yes. So
we've actually been already very fortunate to be involved in, particularly in ICAS related education initiatives. Government of India, the Ministry of Education, has a wonderful initiative now called the Dhara series, where they pick up one part of our knowledge architecture. Could be shipping in 1 month, it could be Ayurveda in another month, it could be music, it could be agriculture. All the different elements of our knowledge system, they are trying to make a design which is attached to a certain place. For example, we did Ayurveda in Bengaluru, we did Kalaripayattu in Kerala, we are doing music and arts in Tamil Nadu, we did shipping in Odisha. And Bṛhat is the policy partner where we write their policy papers. Also, the public communication of making sure that, because the whole design is public participative, it is not just an academic exercise. Academic exercise is one part of it, but it is also coming from the vision that the political leadership in the country has today, particularly Modi ji's idea of making sure that the public is part of this is actually, I think, a game changer. If you look at every single big initiative that has happened, look at Kashi Tamil Sangamam, you should look at some of these things. There is that core component of making sure that people are taking part in this actively, and these are not happening in government silos in different ministries doing their own thing. It is actually about bringing the ministries together and making sure all of them are providing a government interface to people, but using the conduit of knowledge systems. I'm very, very happy that we got and we still get an opportunity to participate in that. In fact, this is going to be amplified much more, especially with the G20 leadership that we have today. Next 1 year in education, in science, in culture, there is a host of initiatives that I'm already aware of, and we've put our hand up to contribute to all of these things in the best way that we can.
that's very heartening to know because I've always, for me, as a maybe a person who's concerned. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
not directly involved in these processes, but I've always wondered. I mean, there's so many initiatives, and they all seem to be doing such great work. But when will it all come
yeah,
together? When will it all channelize into something that then goes into this the
yeah.
well, government initiatives are the way in which they
It
can
is
reach
absolutely.
to the lowest common denominator. So that was my always been
No,
my
this is
concern.
very critical, and I hope we are able to send this message to the audience that you have as well. That this is your state. You will have to work with it and make sure that it represents your cultural interest. There are times where the political appends the cultural. Our job is to make sure that the cultural informs and imbues the political. Once we do that, you are having the three essential elements: your Samaj, your Santa Shakti, and your Satta Shakti. The political, the spiritual, and the social, all working together in one stream. That is when I venture to put it out there. That is when you will really see the force of Bharat.
Right, right. Um, Pankaj, I had wanted you to speak a little bit in Hindi, since we were talking about mother tongue, or one of the objectives, like you spoke just now, how important it is to create a conscious for people to start thinking in their own native mother tongues or native language. So maybe you could speak a little bit in Hindi about the program that you were talking of, simple sentences that, or just to give a sampling to people of the kind of initiative that you will be bringing to the table.
जी, ऐसा एक मत बना लिया गया है अभी, और जो हिंदू धर्म के, हिंदू समाज के जो विरोधी धाराएं हैं, वो ऐसा कहने लगी हैं, ऐसा दावा करने लगे हैं कि हिंदी बहुत कठिन भाषा है। या तो आप इसमें झूर के भरपूर उर्दू, अरबी, फारसी और तुर्की का प्रयोग करें, और अगर आप नहीं करना चाहते हैं तो ये इतनी क्लिष्ट हो जाती है। और ऐसा भी हुआ है कि पिछले 30-40 वर्षों में कुछ पत्रकारों ने ऐसे लेख भी लिखे हैं, ऐसी कहानियां भी लिखी हैं, जिसमें ये बताया गया है कि अगर आप हिंदी को संस्कृतनिष्ठ बनाने का प्रयास करेंगे तो बहुत ही कठिन हो जाएगी। पर ऐसा बिल्कुल भी नहीं है। हमें अभ्यास हो गया है, चूंकि मध्य युग में जो राज्य था वह हिंदू नहीं रहा, वह भारतीय नहीं रहा, और संस्कृत की जो पांडुलिपियां हैं उनको जलाया गया है, उनको समाप्त किया गया है, और विधि की भाषा उसको पूर्णतः, उसको पूरी प्रकार से हमने फारसी या तुर्की में बदल दिया। तो उसके कारण कुछ शब्द प्रचलित हो गए जो कि सरल नहीं है। जिस प्रकार से हिंदी का एक बहुत सुंदर शब्द है रुचि, और बहुत छोटा शब्द है। अब लोग फिर भी जब लिखेंगे या बातचीत करेंगे, ऐसा लगेगा उनको कि वो सभ्य समाज में बैठे हैं, तो बोलते हैं दिलचस्पी। जबकि अगर आप इन दोनों की तुलना करें तो दिलचस्पी बहुत ही कठिन शब्द है और रुचि बहुत ही सरल शब्द है। तो इस प्रकार से बहुत आसानी से आप हिंदी का प्रयोग कर सकते हैं। इसका पहला सिद्धांत यही होना चाहिए जो बोलचाल की भाषा है, कि बोलचाल की भाषा सरल तो सर्वप्रथम होनी चाहिए। अगर इसको सरल नहीं रखेंगे तो ये बोलचाल की भाषा नहीं बनेगी। कुछ शब्द हैं, क्योंकि भाषा जो है वह सदैव उसका विकास होता रहता है, सदैव वह बदलती रहती है, तो उसमें भाषा के पास यह तत्व भी है कि वह दूसरी भाषाओं के सिद्धांत अगर कुछ नए हैं, या ऐसी वस्तुएं जिनका आविष्कार ही हुआ है किसी और दूसरी सभ्यता में, जिस प्रकार से ट्रेन, जैसे ऐसा मजाक, ये एक आमोद प्रमोद का विषय है कि कहते हैं कि देखिए आप तो शुद्ध हिंदी की बात करते हैं और ट्रेन को तो, अच्छा तो आप लौह पथगामिनी बोलेंगे। तो हम नहीं बोलेंगे, क्योंकि ट्रेन का आविष्कार पश्चिम की सभ्यता में हुआ, और ट्रेन शब्द को हम ज्यों का त्यों अपनी भाषा में ले सकते हैं, परंतु समय को वक्त या टाइम कहना, इस प्रकार से भाषा में दूसरी भाषाओं को मिलाना जहां इसकी कोई आवश्यकता ही नहीं है, तो वह जो है वो नहीं करना चाहिए, और उससे भाषा की जो प्रकृति है वो धूमिल होती है। जैसे हमने अभी चर्चा की नागरिक शब्द की, देखिए नागरिक को अगर आप सिटीजन बोल देंगे तो उस शब्द का अर्थ केवल वह है जो एक नगरीय व्यवस्था में रहता है, परंतु जैसा हमने अभी चर्चा की कि नागरिक शब्द का अर्थ तो बहुत कुछ ऊंचा है। नागरिक वह है जिसे कला में, सौंदर्य शास्त्र में, वास्तु में, शिल्प में बड़ा आनंद हो। तो ऐसे शब्द, जैसे ही आपने इसे सिटीजन बोल दिया, जैसे ही आपने यह व्यवस्था खो दी जिसमें आप हिंदी में सोच पाए, तो आपको नागरिक का अर्थ केवल वह रह जाएगा, सिटीजन का अर्थ केवल वह रह जाएगा जो नगर में रहता है, और वह नहीं रह जाएगा जो हमने अभी नागरिक की तरह चर्चा की। जिस तरह से कुशाग्र है, अब कुशाग्र इतना सुंदर शब्द है। कुश घास, एक अमुक प्रकार की घास होती है, उसका जो बिंदु है, उसका जो केंद्र है, वो तो बहुत नुकीला होता है, परंतु वो घास होने के बाद भी किसी भी और दूसरे तंत्र में बहुत आसानी से भेद कर सकता है, छेद कर सकता है, और घास का तिनका होने के बाद भी। तो कुशाग्र बुद्धि उसको बोलते हैं जिसकी सारी केंद्रीय इंद्रियां एक बिंदु में केंद्रित हों, जिससे वह किसी भी कठिन विषय को बहुत आसानी से भेद कर, भले ही वह स्वयं स्वभाव में बहुत कोमल हो, वो एक व्यक्ति की अनुसार एक व्यक्ति के रूप में बहुत कोमल हो, परंतु उसकी बुद्धि इतनी प्रखर, इतनी नुकीली हो कि वह किसी भी गूढ़ विषय में छेद करके अंदर उसको भेद के प्रवेश कर सके। तो यह कुशाग्र है। अगर आप शार्प शब्द का प्रयोग करेंगे तो ये जो सारी इसकी जो बारीकियां हैं इस शब्द की और इस भाषा की, वे खो जाएंगी। तो इसको ही पुनः लाने की हमारे जीवन में, बोलचाल में भी, और कम से कम जब हम साहित्य की, सिद्धांत की, जीवन के अधिक अच्छे पहलुओं की बात करते हैं, कम से कम वो बात करते हुए तो हम, ऐसी बातें करते हुए तो हम ऐसी हिंदी का प्रयोग कर सकें और ये दिखा पाएं कि यह बहुत सरल है और इसमें कोई कठिनाई नहीं है। ये क्लेष्ट होके आपका जीवन और कठिन नहीं बनाने वाली है, बल्कि बहुत मधुरता लाने वाली है। जिस प्रकार से एक जो सिनेमा का अगर एक आखिरी, एक अंतिम उदाहरण मैं लूं तो तीसरी कसम एक सिनेमा था, एक मूवी थी, तो उसका नाम में तो उर्दू है तीसरी कसम, परंतु एक वहां पर वार्तालाप है, एक दृश्य है, बहुत सुंदर है। जो नायिका है वो ट्रेन से अपने गांव वापस जा रही है, अंतिम दृश्य है, और जो नायक है भागते हुए राज कपूर आता है और वहीदा रहमान बहुत प्रेम से उससे बोलती है कि हम तो सोच रहे थे अब भेंट ही ना होगी। अब देखिए, भेंट जो शब्द है, भेंट केवल मिलना नहीं है, इट इज नॉट जस्ट मीटिंग। भेंट का अर्थ इतना सुंदर है, जो आपको बहुत प्रिय है, आप जिसका सम्मान करते हैं, उसे आप प्रस्तुत कर रहे हैं सामने वाले व्यक्ति को। अब ये इस शब्द के गूढ़ रहस्य, इसकी मधुरता, इसकी आत्मीयता इस भाषा के संग लुप्त हो जाएगी अगर इस भाषा में हम ऐसे बातचीत ना करेंगे। हम भूल जाएंगे कि इसमें बातचीत कैसी हो। तो ऐसा ही प्रयास है, और पहला लक्ष्य है इसका आनंद। चूंकि मेरा वैसे भी लक्ष्य रहता है, जो भी हम करें उसमें अगर रस निष्पत्ति नहीं होती है, आनंद नहीं मिलता है, तो वो करने योग्य नहीं है। तो पहला लक्ष्य है ये आनंदमयी हो, दूसरा लक्ष्य है यह सरल हो, तीसरा कि फालतू शब्द, फारसी, अरबी, तुर्की शब्द इसमें ना हो और अंग्रेजी के भी शब्द इसमें ना हो। ये तीन लक्ष्यों को लेती हुई, साहित्य के ऊपर पुनर्वलोकन करती हुई ये श्रृंखला शीघ्र ही आपके सामने आने वाली है। धन्यवाद।
वाह वाह, पंकज जी, मैं सोचती थी कि मैं हिंदी काफी ठीक ठाक बोल लेती हूँ, बट नहीं, मुझे चुप रहना बिकॉज पता नहीं कि कौन से सी इस तरह से परिस्थिति ऐसी हो गई है कि हमें पता भी नहीं कि कौन सा शब्द हिंदी है और कौन सा उर्दू।
जैसे तरह भी उर्दू है, प्रकार हिंदी है, तरह भी उर्दू है, तो जो बहुत अभ्यास में हो गया।
ये छोटे छोटे जो
जी
शब्द हैं
जी
वो भी अभी पता नहीं है ना हमें,
जी
कोई आइडिया ही नहीं है कि ये उर्दू बोल रहे हैं या हिंदी बोल रहे हैं। और ऑल आवर लाइव्स वी वर थिंकिंग वी वर स्पीकिंग इन हिंदी।
जी
तो क्योंकि हिंदी का जो सोर्स हम लोग ने, जैसे मैं तो सीबीएसई की क्या कहते हैं छात्रा रही हूँ, तो थोड़ा थोड़ा थोड़ी बहुत हिंदी सीखी है हमने। जैसे नाइन्थ तक तो हिंदी पोइट्री पढ़ लेते थे और काफी काफी एंजॉय भी किया हमने, काफी उसका आनंद लिया है। बट उसके बाद अनफॉर्चुनेटली व्हेन यू डोंट हैव सेकंड लैंग्वेज एनी मोर आफ्टर 10th you're forced to, you're only concentrating on physics, science, chemistry, and English was always there. There is no second language anymore. And your conscious, your language, the consciousness which is part of your language processing is taken over by, like you rightly pointed out, by your popular culture. And it, Hindi, it's Bollywood. So बॉलीवुड में तो पूरा इट्स बीन टेकन ओवर बाय जो गजल, जो मेरे को तो गुलजार जी बहुत पसंद है, बट मोस्ट ऑफ हिज हिंदी इज उर्दू। सो एनीवे, तो बहुत अच्छा लगा आपको सुन के। एंड आई थिंक काफी आपका वक्त भी ले लिया। आई नो इट्स अ वर्किंग डे फॉर ऑल ऑफ यू, सो if there's anything you would like to add, I think we've covered everything. We've also talked about your long-term goals. So, आपको अगर कुछ if you'd like to add something, I would be more than happy to hear from you, and then maybe we can.
No, I think we've covered our story, and thank you firstly for taking interest in our story. Right? We do it for the world out there, and it's always a great feedback loop when people express interest and give us feedback. Very respectful and always open to that prospect of dialogue and learning. That's a value that we hold very deeply. We hope you're able to identify and resonate with how we are thinking about this. we have absolutely no illusion that we have it all covered. We know, despite all the strengths that we've spoken about, we are very sharp and very clear about the shortcomings that we have as well, and very sincere about our efforts to correct that. So that's the kind of organization, that's the kind of consciousness that we want to build through Bṛhat as our contribution to public culture. We need support. We put our public funding campaign. The crowdfunding campaign is live thanks to Dharmic crowdfunding platform. So if you like our work and if you think this has meaning and value, we request you to see if there is any possibility of supporting us or sharing or connecting us to people who can support. Because ultimately, all of these things are possible only when there is the possibility of sustenance that you might have. I think I am contributing to solving a creative talent strategy for our movement, but that is possible only if we have the resources that we need for going forward as well. So that's one. That's one. But the contribution, we've always been lucky ever since we've started Bṛhat officially 6 months ago, maybe in ideation 9 months ago. The kind of support, encouragement, and reception that we've received, it is something that we never expected ourselves. You go with a certain intent, but that intent has to have the grace and the permission of forces above you to land with a certain kind of force. And at Bṛhat, both organizationally and as a personal attitude, each one of us have that spiritual anchor. We have our own spiritual guide, and we take guidance from them. And for us, that's the real strength, and that is what enables us to collaborate. But we look to build on this, and we hope to have many such conversations and bring meaning. Thank you.
Pankaj, anything you'd like to say or?
No, no.
Okay. So on that note, I would like to thank both of you for having given us your time, because it's not, you needn't thank us, because I think Citti is also on the same, we're also, trying to help initiatives such as yours. We are here only to be able to disseminate this kind of information. That's one of the core, I think, founding principles of Chitti too, is to be able to give voice to initiatives such as yours. So it's a win-win for us. And thank you so much for your time. I would like to urge all those who've been watching, who are watching, who are going to watch, to please look up Bṛhat. It's online, their website. It's beautiful. It's self-explanatory. There is a lot of information there. Encourage your family, your friends, your children, their friends to enroll for the courses. You yourself could enroll for the courses and help Brighat, help us spread the word. And yes, that would be wonderful. So thank you, namaste, and have a wonderful day ahead of you.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.